When I was preparing for this training, my team reminded me, hey, Jenna, do you remember like months ago, there was a topic of wellness and you actually spoke about boundaries because boundaries are so directly linked to the way that you move through life. And so I am really excited to kind of reframe this conversation and also in reframing this boundaries discussion, share a little bit about my book, because guess what? The word boundaries is in my book like 78 times. That's how many times I talk about this topic today. So before we dive in, I want to share a little bit from a behavioral neuroscience researcher, Joaquin Selva. And they say the consequence of not setting healthy boundaries often include stress, financial burdens, wasted time, and relationship issues, which can all result in mental distress like resentment. How many of you are moving through life resenting either humans in it, resenting what you're about to do for the day, resenting your work or the things that are distracting you? Essentially, a lack of boundaries can negatively impact basically all aspects of your life. And I think a lot of us have had that consequence in our life, whether it's today or we've had it in the past. I truly believe that a lack of boundaries can lead us to burnout. And I think the world is kind of like collectively in this state or getting really close to this state of burnout. So one part in my book, and I'm just going to read it to you. This is a section from my book. It says this, it says, in case it's unclear, my burnout didn't happen overnight. Does it ever? It was slow and sweltering, adding a deadline here and an event there until my commitments had become a full-on bonfire, raging out of control with little room to breathe. I didn't realize until it was too late, but I can see now exactly how it happened. Somewhere between shooting my first wedding as a photographer and the night of my undoing, I had tricked myself into believing that boundaries were for weak people, whatever that meant. I thought I was the kind of person who could face the hardship of stress and exhaustion without having to do anything about it. I thought I could just power through a little bit longer and then I'd take a break once things slowed down. How many of you guys have told yourself that? Once things slow down, I'll do that thing. But things never slowed down because I didn't slow down. Every time that small voice inside of me asked me to slow down, I would tell myself it was just the temptation to give up, to lose my momentum, or to cash in a break too early. Like it's something I had to suffer through in order to learn. Like it was the voice of pessimism. And me, well, I was an optimist, an overcomer, an achiever, stopping, turning back, slowing down, saying no. I wanted those options out of my playbook. I wanted to prove to myself and everyone who was watching that I didn't need breaks. I wasn't tired. I didn't need a rest. It wasn't time to sit on the bench. So that is a part from my book. And that kind of shares a little bit about how my lack of boundaries led to a massive burnout. And I want to share that piece because I think for a lot of us, we connect this idea of boundaries with this belief that like weak people set them, that like it's up to us to power through, to forge on. And what I think is really fascinating is that the more boundaries I've invited into my life, and more specifically, the more I've communicated my boundaries, the more respect I have, but also the more opportunity I have to flex the boundary muscle and recognize that it actually makes me really strong. I want to talk about how it is so important, one, that we set boundaries, but two, that we revisit them. So here's a little story. We live next to a bowling alley, and we recently took Coco, my 3.5-year-old, to the bowling alley. And have you guys ever bowled with like the bumpers up? Like you pop the bumpers up and then it's impossible for you to go into the gutter. Well, I look at boundaries like the bumpers in my life. When I have boundaries and they're popped up, when I throw that ball down the lane, it is going to go and be aimed straight. Whenever I don't have bumpers in my life, AKA boundaries, that's when I go in the gutter. And so I was thinking about, oh my gosh, this is the perfect analogy because boundaries literally are the guardrails that most of us need in our life. Now, I don't know about you, but I was raised in the Midwest. I live in the Midwest. I am a people pleaser to my core. And this notion of boundaries used to make me feel like I was just going to disappoint people. Me saying no equaled disappointment for others. And that made me highly uncomfortable. And so I've had to learn over the years this one important truth. And this is a line from my book. And I want for you to write this down. Boundaries do not keep things, people, or opportunities out of your life. They keep you in your life. Let me repeat that. Boundaries do not keep things or people or opportunities out of your life. They keep you in your life. And this is so massively important because I think a lot of us look at boundaries as almost like this fence around us, right? Like keeping things out. When I have boundaries, I am keeping the world at bay. But in reality, when you have boundaries, it is establishing this clear distinction of how you need to be kept into your life. Something that's been really interesting about my journey in the last 2 years is that I've learned that I have ADHD. I never knew I had ADHD. My dad had it. Never thought to tell his children that he had it. And now all of us kids as grown adults are now discovering, wow, we have neurodivergent brains. That means that my brain operates in a really funky way. And if I don't establish boundaries, I cannot focus. I cannot get tasks done. My brain feels like it has a million tabs open. And so when I think about this idea of boundaries and staying in the lane and moving in the right direction, it really reminds me of how important it is for us to be focused on the pins, to be focused on the right thing. So I am going to share with you a script that has been life-changing. For me in my life, I recognize that I need bumpers. I need gatekeepers, whether it is things on my phone that tell me, hey, you've spent a little bit too long on Instagram today, or actual human beings who say, hey, you said you didn't want this thing and now you're committing to it. Are you sure you want it? And in writing my first book, I had created this Gmail folder in my life years ago because I was so fortunate to get people who would reach out and say, Jenna, you need to write a book. You need to write a book. And I created this boundary and I said, I'm going to just create a folder in my Gmail. And I told my team, if anyone ever writes me about writing a book, just drop their email directly into that folder. I'm not ready and I will know when the time is right. And so there's this Gmail folder that said, and it was titled, If I Write a Book. I didn't open it for years. And when the time was right, because I had that boundary, I knew, hey, there might be opportunities waiting for me here. And I went back and visited that folder and I was reminded, oh, I am so grateful that I had that boundary in place because now the timing is right. Now alignment is undeniable. And so I've had to create boundaries like this in my life, in my work, in my relationships. And so when I finally was pregnant with my daughter, Coco, I created a very firm boundary. And I said, for the next year, I'm going to say no to everything. I am going to politely decline every opportunity that will take me away from home or take me away from motherhood and my baby. And I'm just going to say no. And I knew that in order to actually follow through on that, I had to have some tools in my toolbox. So here's a tool that I am literally handing to you that I want for you to implement in your life. If somebody invites you, whether it's a friend or a coworker, if you get asked to do this special assignment or you want somebody asks you to like join a club or do something else, I want for you to save this in your toolbox. So here is exactly what my template says. And I have it memorized now because I've used it so many times. It says, dear, and then you fill in their name. Thank you so incredibly much for this opportunity. I am so grateful and flattered that you thought of me. I am going to say no. And I want for you to know, first and foremost, that me saying no is not a reflection of you or your idea or this invitation. Me saying no is literally me living out my values, the things that are most important to me right now in my life. And I want for you to know that in me saying no, all I hope it does is encourage you that you can create boundaries just like this in your life. I will be cheering you on, and I am confident our paths will cross again soon. Best wishes, Jenna. Can you see how that feels different than just saying, hey, no thanks, or no, I'm too busy? The thing about boundaries is that a lot of our fear comes in letting people down or offending people. But when we say, hey, I'm going to say no to this thing, but I'm only saying no, not because of you or what you're doing, but because of me and my life, it not only creates that boundary in a safe way, but it also invites people to step in and say, hey, what are my values? Where are my boundaries? How am I clearly communicating them?
This can be your day for personal growth. This can be that day you committed to and you remember and you go, that was the day I got myself a community. I got better coaches. I committed to making my life the absolute best that I could. This is that day. Make today your growth day. Click the button on this page and sign up right now.